All right. Welcome, everyone, to Cedarsong Conversations. My name is Nicole Corbo, and I am going to be facilitating today's conversation. I'm going to go over our community agreements briefly. I'm going to introduce today's topic, and then I'm going to pretty much open the floor because this is not a class. I'm not leading the conversation. I'm just facilitating it. So let's begin with those agreements. I've written them down to help my brain. First and foremost, we ask for patience with technology. Even though we've all been Zooming through the pandemic, everybody has different levels of comfort. So please be patient with yourself if you are having tech issues, and please be patient with others and myself if I am having tech issues. Since we are recording today, I'm just going to ask that you please stay muted if you are not the person speaking. I already mentioned that you can come and go as you need. If you want to add some information into the chat, like a link, in fact, I have a number of links that I'm already planning to share with you all today to support this conversation and this topic. You are welcome to do that. And sometimes if someone is speaking and something comes up for you, you might want to add that in the chat. It's fine. But since this is a conversation, we really encourage you to raise your hand, or as my friend Laura Whitaker introduced me to, you can put your hand to your heart and I'll know to call you in to speak. And on that note, in terms of speaking, we try to practice stepping forward and stepping back. So if you are someone who tends to talk a lot, we ask that you step back and listen. And if you are someone who tends to be more quiet and reserved and thinks that maybe what you have to say might not be important enough or interesting enough, or you just feel like you might trip over your words, we want to invite you to step forward. And that's what we're going to create space for. Those of us who like to talk a lot, we're going to step back. And so your voice is important. We invite it to be a part of this conversation. We ask that you please speak from your experience. Your experience is so valuable, each and every one of you, as opposed to, rather than speaking from opinion or speaking of, I heard that. Really try to speak from a place of experience. We want to be focused on when we are speaking, and if we say something that impacts someone in a certain way, we want to stay connected to the impact as opposed to getting caught up in intention. And what I mean by that is that we get to recognize that harm can be caused even when there was no intention to cause harm. And the way that we get to address those moments of harm being caused when we have had an unintended impact on someone is we get to say, yes, this happened. Yes, what I expressed landed this certain way. And we get to not take it personally so that we can be open to shift. And part of that, part of showing up in that way, is being aware of the language that we use when we are describing a person or a group of people, recognizing that no group is a monolith, and that so we get to agree to listen to the people who are here in this space when they call us in or call us out. in regards to their lived experience. And speaking in terms of language that we use, someone might ask you to refer to them or the people in the group that they identify with in a different way. And last week, when the topic was access to outdoor learning for children, neurodivergent children, Emily used the example of identity first language, which she explained seems to be the preference, at least among adults in the autistic community. And so in that community, they prefer, at least those who have expressed it, prefer to be referred to as autistic people as opposed to a person with autism. Whatever your experience is, whatever your preference is, this is a space where you can speak it out. And if someone has misspoken or misstepped, we get to, like I said, listen to the impact rather than getting caught up in the intention of what you were saying. I know that everyone here is a good and kind person, so that is never in question, not once. And this is also connected to the idea of creating a space where people can be brave, as opposed to trying to create a space that is safe, because it is impossible for us to create a space that is safe for everyone. It is impossible for us to ensure that no one will misstep, that no one will misspeak. That is life. But what we get to do is we get to agree that this is a brave space, a space where we can feel brave to speak our truths and speak to our experience. And we can know, we can agree that we are going to listen. And that helps to create a space where we can all be brave to speak our truths. All right, I think that I got all of our I think I got all of the agreements. If I missed anything, would anyone like to speak up and share right now? Or if there's something you want to add? Okay. All right, you can always bring it up. Our topic today is children with minimum access to outdoor spaces. You know, addressing that very, very real issue. And what I have noticed is that there are many aspects to the topic of access and inclusion. And this particular topic, when we are talking about limited outdoor space, there are many aspects to this one topic within the grander topic. And some of the things that I've noticed are, you know, access can be impacted by the fact that there is simply no close by green space, not at school, not near the home. One of the resources that I'm going to share with you in the chat at some point is, I jumped ahead. I'm going to finish this thought and then I'm going to go backwards. One of the articles that I want to share with you is actually about how redlining has impacted access to green space. Another aspect of this topic is, you know, maybe the adults in a child's life are not able to share time in nature with their child. And that could be time because of work. That could be time because of distance to green spaces, as I already mentioned. It could also have to do, you know, an adult could be unable to share time in nature because of their comfort level with being outdoors, whether that's about, you know, the weather and gear, or whether that's about being historically excluded from green spaces in in colonized places. And then there is perception. The aspect, and I'm actually writing a blog about this right now, just thinking that nature connection has to be something grand, in the wilderness, in the far off places. And so those are some of the things that have come up for me when thinking about children with minimum access to outdoor spaces. Now, before we dive into this conversation, this is why I said I'm going to step back, we are going to just briefly do some introductions. We're going to go around the Zoom room and we are going to introduce ourselves with our name, our pronouns, and where we are calling from. And since I'm already unmuted, I will go ahead and get us started. My name is Nicole Corbo. My pronouns are she and her. I am joining you all from the unceded ancestral lands of numerous Coast Salish tribes. Among them are the Muckleshoot, the Duwamish, the Puyallup, and the Snoqualmie. And those 4 tribes that I just mentioned are still here, thriving in vibrant communities, still very much working to protect this land. I honor the land itself, and I also acknowledge that outdoor and nature-based learning has been practiced by Indigenous peoples everywhere since time immemorial. And I am going to just go around the screen and ask you to introduce yourselves. Rhonda, you're next on my screen. Would you go ahead and share?
Hi, I'm Rhonda Pollock, she, her, and I am calling in from Nantucket, Massachusetts, Nantucket Island, and the Wampanoag people. The Nantucket Wampanoag were the tribe that were here prior to European settlers, and they were here for 12,000 years. There are no longer any Wampanoag here, though, but there are on our sister island of Martha's Vineyard.
Thank you, Rhonda. Fabienne, you are next on my screen. Will you share with us?
Yes, I will. My name is Fabienne, she, her. I'm calling from Los Angeles, and the school that we are every day with the children, it's on Tongva land in Pasadena, in the Arroyo Seco.
I did not unmute myself. I think I unmuted you. Thank you, Fabienne. Thank you for being here. Tiffany, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tiffany Sabatini, she, her pronouns, calling in from the very south of the Salish Sea in what is currently known as Olympia, Washington. And some of the tribes that live here and currently have reservations but use the entire land are the Squaxin and the Nisqually. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Tiffany. Laura, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself? Laura Whitaker, sorry.
I'm Laura Whitaker, she, her pronouns, from the which is the current and ancestral home of the Ojibwe people, before them the Dakota and Northern Cheyenne people, and other native peoples from time immemorial.
Thanks, Laura. Glad you're here. Azusa, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Azusa Washio, she, her. I'm calling from northern New Jersey, and I learned it's the land of Munsee Lenape, Munsee Lenape people. And I learned that most of them were post moved to Oklahoma, but their name is on here as the names of trails in the reservation. So I feel their history is here and their culture is here. Thank you.
Thank you, Azusa. So glad you're here. Christina, you are next on my screen. Will you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Christina, best she, her, calling in from central New Jersey. Hello, fellow New Jerseyan. New Brunswick, New Jersey is where I call home.
Thank you, Christina. So glad you're here. Oh, and I forgot, I was going to put in the chat, if anyone is unfamiliar with the tribes whose land you are on, you can look on this website that I just posted in the chat and learn a little bit about whose land you're on. Courtney, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and for having me as well. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently calling in from the unceded lands of the Duwamish people, but I will be living on San Juan Island again this summer, leading a preschool program. And the San Juan Islands, or the now called San Juan Islands, are part of the Salish Sea, and they are the territories of the several tribes. Let's see if I can remember some of them. The Lami, Samish, Sklallam, Wasanik, Lekwungen, Songhees, and Coast Salish. Yeah, there are a number of tribes that call that land and those waters theirs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Courtney. So glad you're here. Laura Judd, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Laura Judd. I'm just like there's Nicole and other Nicole, there's Laura Whitaker and I'm other Laura. And last call there was Michelle and other Michelle, so it's kind of funny that there's 3 pairings of us. She, her are the pronouns that I use, and I'm on Anishinaabe land in Ojibwe, just like Laura Whitaker in Duluth, Minnesota, on the shores of Lake Superior.
Beautiful. So glad you're here, Laura. Michelle, you are next on my screen. Will you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm Michelle Pierce, calling from the land of the Eastern Band of Cherokee, what is currently known as Asheville, North Carolina.
Beautiful. Thank you. So glad you're here, Michelle. Valeria, you are next on my screen. Will you please introduce yourself and tell me if I mispronounced your
Sure.
name?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I was late. Well, I'm Valeria Ortiz, she, her. I'm in Bogota, Colombia. And well, I just, by listening to your answers, I think I have to say, like, who were the people that lived here? Like, who were the owners of the land? And where I am, there was a group of indigenous people called Los Muiscas. Have you heard about it? Los Muiscas.
Thank you. Yes, Valeria, we try to acknowledge, unless the person speaking is indigenous, we try to acknowledge that we are on stolen land. And so I appreciate, I had not heard of Los Muiscas before. Thank you. We're glad you're here. And Curtis, will you please introduce yourself? You are the last person on my screen.
Hey everyone, we'll see if my internet connection lets me do this. My name's Curtis, he, him pronouns. I'm currently on the the lands of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Muckleshoot, and Tulalip, also referred to as Seattle, but spent a lot of time around the waters of the Coast Salish peoples. Hopefully that went through, and yes, nice to be here sharing this space with you all.
Great to see you, Curtis. We're glad you're here, and it came through loud and clear. Oh, and I 3 things I just want to reiterate for anybody that wasn't here in the beginning. It's impossible for you to be late. You can come and you can leave as you need to. We are recording this particular series on access. And so if you're not speaking, I just ask that you please mute your microphone. And when you do want to speak, you can raise your hand. You can also use the raise hand function if that's what you're comfortable with. You can put your hand to your heart. Just make sure I can see your heart, unlike my own. So I would have to tilt my camera down. If you put your hand to your heart, I will know that you have something in your heart that you want to share. All right, now I jumped ahead earlier. I sort of pre-introed the conversation. I'm not going to go through it all again. I just want to say that I think that there are multiple aspects to this conversation about access to outdoor spaces, but where children, families, or schools have minimal access to outdoor spaces. I think that it includes not having nearby space. I think that it includes not having time to go or be in natural spaces. And I think most of all, that it is an issue of perception. And so to get the conversation started, I am going to share that I believe that we can begin to address issues of access for those who have limited outdoor space. I believe we begin to address it with a perspective shift. And the question I pose to all of you is, what do you think about that? And also, what are you seeing that's working to address this issue, either in your community or in your area? Maybe a better question to get you all started would be, I just shared with you what I think is one of the sort of most important places to begin addressing this issue of access to outdoor learning for people who have limited outdoor space. But what do you think? Where do you think we start to address this? Or even, what are some of the issues with access to outdoor space that you see in your community and in your area? Yeah, Fabienne, please go ahead.
I felt to be in a city like Los Angeles, and I'm coming from Switzerland, where we have a lot of outdoor spaces and we grow up, pretty with a lot of nature around. A lot of fear from people, fear to let their children go outside, fear of themselves going outside, to be protected, because there was not a big knowledge maybe about the outside. I felt that guardedness, parents were guarded to let their children go play outside or to walk to school. When my children, when they grew up, they were walking to school, and it was seen in a way like, oh my goodness, are you letting children walk to school? It's just a fear. I felt there was a fear.
I would
Letty,
like to add something.
please.
Fabian, in regard to what she was saying, that I also think it is kind of fear, but also that parents and, well, the people in charge of children have no idea of the benefits and like the needs that for children to go outside, play outside, have freedom to explore, to feel. And so I think that sometimes is okay. I don't like, for example, I work with 4 years, 4-year-olds in pre-K, and I have parents that are like, I hate like getting dirty, so I'm not, I'm like, for any reason, I'm going to go outside and get muddy. And I'm like, my God, but you have no idea, like, what are the consequences of not doing this with your kid? So I think it's more about like that people have no idea, and people think that what they do inside is the same as doing outside, or they really don't understand what the benefits are.
Laura, I see you with your hand to your heart. Please.
I would just add to that that in addition to not knowing many of the benefits of outdoor play and learning, oftentimes I think children that have less access to nature are also the children that are pressured to be prepared for kindergarten in an academically rigorous program. And I think the idea of what it means to be prepared for school needs a shift in perspective, so that there is more, so that access to nature is not a right of the privileged, but a right of all children, because a childhood based in play prepares all children for a life of learning.
Here, here. I'm looking, Christina, I feel like what Laura just shared is sort of next to what we were talking about a little bit earlier today. I don't mean to call you out, but if you want to share some of your thoughts that you shared earlier.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. I'm thinking a little bit, I'm stuck on your question, like what are the barriers? So I'm making a little diagram over here. My brain is stuck in this of like, what are the actual barriers in my community? So I think in response to Fabienne, I see a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot of fear. I see some fear too in parents allowing their children far from home in our community, but I think that's relative to the amount of violence that we see in our community. So we have frequent shootings or shots fired like within blocks of our home. I think there was 1 week last summer where someone opened fire at like the closest park to us around like 6 o'clock in the evening, where our community garden is. And that's like, you know, we were almost there. I planned to water our garden that night, and it's right next to a skate park. Like the park is packed out at night. And that was the first of a series of shootings that happened within a 1 mile radius of us, like every night of the week. So I think in communities like ours, concerns about violence are real. So I can understand some of parental fear. I do think the parenting philosophy differences come into play a lot. So a lot of the parents in our community, I think, give their children a lot of autonomy. And actually, a lot of kids do spend time outside their homes when the weather is nice, exploring the small green spaces and like yards and trees under the porches. So I value that about our community. But you started off asking about solutions, Nicole. And one of the things that I feel is a strong solution for young people is biking. So if transportation is a concern and parents are inaccessible, whether that's because of work, because they're too tired after work to accompany kids, and kids are kind of gridlocked in the city, that teaching biking, providing access to bikes really provides a greater radius for kids to be able to go find green space on their own. So that's one solution that I think I see in our community. I coach a girls biking program. I volunteer at a bike exchange in the community that sells bikes to kids at low cost. And I find that with all of our little biking buddies, it has really opened up their range in the city.
Thank you, Christina. I appreciate that. And what I hear in that also is an acknowledgement that for the need for that perspective shift in terms of what does it even mean to meaningfully connect with nature. And riding your bike is as valid as going for a hike in the national forest in terms of where and how that connection can happen. Yeah. Did anybody else have something they wanted to add in? I would love to, oh, I see you, Laura Judd, and I see you, Michelle. Go ahead, Laura Judd.
I just want to say that I agree with you with that perspective change in so many ways in what everyone is saying. And just if we can highlight all the benefits and maybe find those solutions, I think that could be helpful to many people across many ways. And then when another, I think, challenge that some people find is the cost of gear. So where we live, it's very cold. And I think where many of you are, you know, the wet or the cold. And so I think it's a lot to ask of people to have to pay for the proper gear themselves, because we know that children can play and play and play and play and play and play and play if they are warm and cozy and dry, no matter the temperature or wetness, as long as they have this gear. But I think that the gear that can keep the children dry and safe is really, really pricey. And so I've seen there is the solution of grants. I think that there are companies, so many companies that are really generous and will outfit entire classes. So I think that's something, because that's also in that, maybe that perspective a little bit, but you know, maybe it's just the reality of life of when someone has their one outfit or their one good pair of shoes. It's not that you go out and get them muddy and drenched, because there isn't another pair to change into. And so by being able to outfit everyone, then you can circumvent some of that worry. So part perspective, part logistics, I guess.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Thank you for highlighting that. Michelle, I saw that you had raised your hand and had something to share. Please go ahead.
Yeah, that was actually, Laura just kind of finished up with what I was going to say. I don't come from a nature school or forest school background, but more from an environmental education center background. And so where the center itself may have had limited accessibility just because it's not on a public transportation route, there is a parking fee and things like that. For field trip students to be able to come and spend the day there, we kept those prices really low. But then once they got there and we had this great, amazing space for them to go out and play and get dirty or wet or muddy, again, yeah, it came into, they might not have raincoats, or they might not have like an extra pair of shoes to change into if it was a creek program for them. And so with a grant that was for one program to support a group of students coming, we were able to buy hundreds of Croc type shoes. It smelled awful in the classroom for so long because they're like that really cheap rubbery material. But with those hundreds of Crocs for those students, like all sizes, all shapes, all things like that, we would then have them for the whole year for field trip students to use as well. And so that's been a huge help to have something like that. So yeah, having a way to support that gear so that they can just borrow them for the day. We, you know, sanitize them at the end of the day so that while they're there in a place that is in their community, but they may not even have regular access to anyway, we're able to provide a really good, positive time for them.
Thank you. Yeah, gear access it has to be part of the conversation, and it has to be part of the solution. Courtney, I saw that you raised your hand. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, Michelle, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing. And thanks all of you for sharing all of these thoughts about, yeah, barriers and challenges and also solutions. I just wanted to throw out like a sort of like high level, I don't know, big picture future dreaming type of thought specifically for like urban settings in cities. I saw something somewhere. I don't know how to find it again, but I need to do a little bit more research about a city. I think it was somewhere in Europe that had either started out this way or was redesigned with the children like programming in the center of the city. And maybe this was a made up city. I'm pretty sure it was real though. And it was just so centered around the interests of the young people or the needs of the children. And I feel like there's an Albert Einstein quote too about like a measure of like society being by how they take care of their children or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, I'm just thinking about like, I mean, I'm not like I'm not involved in politics myself, but just like lobbying for representatives and or bills or things that can really hopefully like create positive change for how we want to like help create and build this future for children so that it ultimately of course like benefits everyone and is just a more functional way of interacting with each other and the earth. I don't know. I love that bicycling, all those programs that you're involved in, Christina. It makes me think of one in Seattle that I'd like to get reconnected with. Anyway, I don't know. I was like thinking about this one program. If I can find, or not program, the city example that just seemed so idyllic, and I'll send it somehow to the group if I can find it.
Yes, please. When you described that, I got this visual in my head of like, it was sort of like a spiral with the children and the joy that they sort of live in and emanate at the center. And I want to live there. Let's build that place. Tiffany, did I see you wave your hand? You did?
Yeah, I did. I was
so.
thinking, I was thinking it also kind of in terms of city planning when I was sort of trying to visualize. I think my mind just went towards living in the city because the difference I experience, like in the main locations I've lived, I grew up out in the forest, out of town. Then I moved to Seattle and I lived on Beacon Hill, and that's really inner city. And now I live in Olympia, where we have an incredible park system. Doesn't matter what neighborhood you live in, you're really close to a park that has some, maybe a general playground, but it also has some green wild space. But I was thinking about when I was on Beacon Hill, how did I, as this person that grew out in the country, find ways to connect to nature and really going for walks in the neighborhood, even like the smallest tree, just like trees and watching them change color that were planted along the sidewalk, or observing like the pigeons and the crows behavior there. Like, I think that there are, going down to the seaside along where all the sculptures are, I think that there were, for me, a lot of opportunities to connect with nature, just present. So I think, in some ways, encouraging just the smallest steps of, even if you live in a really inner city place, just going for a walk and putting like your eyes on of like, well, where am I seeing this? And if you go on that same walk all the time, then there are changes to connect with kids. Kids are so much better at seeing those things than we are even. So I just sort of wanted to put it out there, just of the simplicity of it can be a part of it too.
Hear, hear. I mean, there are some people who can't even go for a walk, but they can still connect with nature by the plant in their house or the spider on their wall, or, you know, we don't even have to go anywhere. Azusa, did I see you raise a hand? I did. Yeah.
Yes. As Courtney and Tiffany mentioned city planning, I wanted to mention I am originally from Japan, and many Japanese schools have school gardens, like vegetable gardens, that they grow vegetables in their schoolyards, or they borrow a space across from schools to tend their garden and observe their growth. So I was thinking if we could make a space like that in school years, and it can be accessed by every student, that even if their families could not take them to forests or larger amount of nature, but if we could make the school years a better place in terms of nature, it could be helpful for a lot of children that are less privileged in access to the nature. That's what I was thinking. And I know Nicole has been working with schools, so that could be big one step for the children in the United States to have an access to nature.
Thank you, Azusa. And you bring up such a wonderful point, and there's a wonderful organization, Green Schoolyards USA. I will put the link for that in the chat as well, that I already shared with you, Azusa. And yeah, it is a great starting place. Courtney, did I see your hand to your heart? No.
Oh, I might have put it there. Just, I don't have, I'm researching, I'm finding some things.
Wonderful, wonderful. I do that
like,
too. Sometimes when I'm thinking or talking, I will just put my hand on my heart. I would love to circle back to something that Laura Whitaker had brought up, and it is also related to a perspective shift. You know, the idea of kindergarten readiness and how what ends up happening is more, you know, you've got all of these people of affluence because of the research sending their kids to outdoor nature-based schools. You know, they know that that's what's best. And also they have the financial means to do it, for the gear, for the cost of the schools and all of that. But I really appreciated how, Laura, you called out the perspective shift that is necessary around what being kindergarten ready actually means, and how that can also impact access in situations where there's limited access to outdoor spaces, where the outdoor spaces are just not that big, or there's more concrete, or, you know, whatever the limited space is about, that has to be part of the conversation. I just wanted to highlight that because I don't think it gets talked about enough in this particular realm of this conversation. I'm wondering what's coming up for folks. What's swirling in your minds, whether it's around, more of the challenges or whether it's around, the kind of big picture ideas for solutions, or if it's just around things that you're doing or that you're seeing being done in your community, in your area, to ensure that kids who have limited access to outdoor spaces are still able to access outdoors and connection with nature. What's coming up for you? Yeah, Fabienne, please.
I just think what you said, Azusa, about having at the public schools, or because schools, everybody has to go to school. So everybody has access to, everybody goes to school. And if the schools would start doing community gardens or school gardens, even just start with 1 or 2 garden beds and they rotate, and for the children, I think that's a beautiful idea. And I see it a little bit over here in Los Angeles. Many of our public schools, they do have garden beds and they do have volunteers who come in, who talk to the kids about growing things and growing vegetables or growing flowers and growing plants. And the interest is really, really there. And that would give access to everybody, as a starting point to more. Maybe I think that's a beautiful idea.
Thank you, Fabienne. Thank you for highlighting that. Laura Whitaker, I see your hand to your heart. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on that regarding something that's happening in Minnesota in schools that has come up as a result of the pandemic burnout for kindergarten teachers. The Minnesota Department of Education has noticed, over the years that nature preschoolers are gaining a lot of traction in our state. Surprise! And kids are really happy and teachers are really happy in that setting. And so they're beginning community circles of interested in transitioning outside. And the impetus for this is to improve mental health in the classroom for both teachers and children. And so I think trying to find those spaces where we know that the work we do can bring positive impacts to people in traditional school settings, and kind of finding ways to link where they're at can be one way that more children have access to nature, big nature or small nature in their schools.
I love that. And I just want to big shout out and kudos to all of the amazing work that you all are doing in Minnesota. I mean, Washington gets a lot of credit for being a leader because we got licensing, but you all are just doing amazing things.
Well,
I appreciate
very
it.
much.
Yeah. And something that you said in the last part of your share about access to big spaces and small spaces. If we think about it as sort of this continuum, if as an early learner, if in your school, in your time in school, you are having this experience where you meaningfully connect with nature, and it starts early and it goes the whole way, then I think logically it would make sense that there will be more and more people who see themselves in nature and will be willing to go out and do the big nature things. And they'll see themselves in it. And there's a podcast that I'm going to go ahead and put these things in the chat now. There's a podcast that I want to recommend to you all. It's called Outside Voices Podcast, and it is really all about that. It's about reframing what it means to be connected to nature. And also, just kind of like looping in all of the things that have been shared, we have to address it from these different places, providing access through programs like bikes, through programs at nature centers where gear is also, or in all of these situations where gear and access to appropriate gear so that people can be comfortable and safe having fun outdoors is a part of it. Like, it's all of it. And big, we have the small systemic changes and then the big systemic changes where we are, revamping city layouts so that, that we're centered in our common goals and beliefs and values. Yeah, there's lots to be done. I'm glad to be in community with amazing people such as yourselves who want to do it. And yes, please, thank you. If you want to share any resources in the chat, please go ahead and do so. We have about 3 more minutes. And I just want to make sure that, if anything has come up for anyone, especially when anybody who hasn't really had an opportunity to speak yet today, I want to go ahead and call you in and invite you to share for a minute or two before we wrap up. And or if you have already shared and you have more to say, please, you can also come on in. Anyone want to put a fine point on the conversation before we wrap up? Rhonda, go right ahead.
Nicole, listening to all of this great conversation, it makes me think that talking about access, it goes hand in hand with the conversation that we're going to have about socioeconomic access to programs. And one of the big thoughts that, I don't know if it was you or another mentioned, was the green schoolyards. And a lot of my thoughts lately have been how we really need to get programs into public schools and how there needs to be, initiatives to do things with like school administrators and to get people to understand that play is learning. And it's there's a whole shift in mindset and what is kindergarten readiness. So there's so many pieces to just this conversation that has to do with all the other conversations that the 6-week series, I don't know if it's even enough it's just a spark. So, but it's exciting that it's happening. So all these things were going off in my head that yes, it is, there's so many different avenues that we can go to, and there's so many different things that need to be addressed, but really getting people to understand like the value in how children truly learn at such like profound learning that happens when children are outside. So it is a shift in how people think, and how do we get them? How do we get that to come across and to really value that? That's my
Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda. I couldn't agree with you more. That is definitely a big part of my personal mission. I want to thank all of you for being here today, for the richness that each of you brought to this conversation. And I want to invite you to please come back again next week on May 10th, when Dr. Annika Prather will be facilitating the conversation about including children of color. And this will be, well, you know, it was recorded and it will be available on the Cedarsong Conversations webpage, along with the previous two. Yeah, thank you, everyone. I'm gonna stop recording.